Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to look at a very specific ethical system. At its core, it's about how to lead a spiritual life while at the same time protecting yourself from, let's say, negative influences. And the whole thing revolves around a question that probably every one of us has asked at some point. That's the question exactly. How do you protect yourself from negative forces? The teaching we're dealing with today aims to provide an answer to precisely that. And not just a purely theoretical one, but one that offers very practical instructions for everyday life. The first step is to build a strong foundation. The idea behind it is pretty clever. You don't just passively defend yourself, you actively create a base that makes you strong and, yes, resilient from the ground up. Okay, let's look at the definition. This path of purity that we're talking about is an ethical way of life, and it has a dual purpose, so to speak. On one hand, it's the foundation for making spiritual progress, and on the other hand, it's like a shield against everything that wants to stop you from doing so. Here, we can see this central conflict quite well. On the left side is the ethically pure life, our foundation, our shield, and opposite that is the adversary, a so-called negative force. Its goal is to block progress and gain power over us, so it's a kind of constant tug-of-war between these two poles. So, now let's get specific. How exactly do you build this foundation? Well, it's based on something you could call the imperative of being good. This means it's about the active cultivation of certain positive qualities. Important building blocks for this foundation are 4 central virtues: love, compassion, truthfulness, and humility. These aren't abstract ideas, but very practical tools. You are meant to consciously live and apply them in your daily life in order to lead this pure and therefore protected life. But in addition to the things you're supposed to do, there are also very clear recommendations about what you're better off avoiding. These no-goes are not arbitrary prohibitions, however. There's a deeper spiritual reason behind them, and we're going to take a look at that now. Basically, there are 2 major areas to abstain from. The first is diet. No meat, no fish, and no eggs. The second area is intoxicants, so hands-off alcohol and drugs. Let's start with diet. Why these strict rules? Well, the teaching says that the consumption of animal products is a kind of spiritual burden. Accordingly, you take on a guilt that weakens your own spiritual energy, and that, in turn, makes you susceptible to negative influences. And with intoxicants, the reasoning is very similar, but with a different focus. Here, it's mainly about our will. Alcohol and drugs are seen as substances that massively weaken willpower and cloud the mind. And this weakened state, according to the teaching, literally opens the door for negative forces. The shield becomes permeable. Okay, and now we come to a topic that is truly complex: sexuality. Here, there is no simple yes or no answer. It's not so black and white. The evaluation of an act here depends on one very, very crucial factor. Take a look at this. In this teaching, sexuality is evaluated completely differently depending on who is acting. For a spiritually highly developed, pure person, it can be a divine act, an expression of the deepest connection. But for a so-called unawakened person, it is the exact opposite, a primary channel through which one loses energy to the negative force. So it's not about the act itself, but about the person's state of consciousness. And this quote here sums it up perfectly. It's not about rigid rules and commandments that you just follow. Much, much more important than what you do is your inner state, your own level of spiritual maturity. That is the key to understanding this entire ethic. And so everything is slowly starting to come together. All these individual points, the virtues, the prohibitions, the nuanced view of sexuality, it all comes down to a single overarching principle. This is the absolute core point. In this system, the morality of an act is not set in stone. It is relative and depends directly on the degree of purity and consciousness of the person who is acting. So what can be a spiritual act for one person is harmful to another. Consciousness determines the consequences. And that brings us to one last question, one that I'd just like to leave you with to think about. Completely independent of this system we've been looking at, what does the concept of a pure life actually mean to you personally? Here and now in our modern world. An interesting question, I think. Thank you for watching.